Welcome to the Middleware Tech YouTube channel. In this series, you'll learn about object-oriented programming using Python. All code examples used in the videos will be available on GitHub. Let's get started.
We can define it as an object. So assume I find a particular object like a pen. I've given an example of pen, or I can give an example of mobile as a mobile object or obj. So if I'm going to define a particular object, each and every object has its attribute and action. Okay. So if I'm going to take this object also have some attribute. Some attribute, if you take two attribute like cost, like brand, and if you take a particular action for a particular object like calling, so each and every object has some attribute and action. So if you remember last day, I told you how I can create a class based on this concept, like if I'm going to create a particular class, then I'll create a class like class mobile. So if I'm going to create a class mobile, colon, I have to define the class, use some indentation, and then you have to right now here. What I told you, first point, like attribute is defined as instance variable inside inside class. First point. So this is my attribute. This attribute is defined instance variable inside a class. Instance variable means what? I'm coming into that. Instance variable. So instance variable, assume I'm going to define the constructor here. I'll talk about this define. I told you a constructor is defined as like this. And this is my constructor. I'll try to explore onto this and more onto this constructor. So attribute is defined as an instance variable inside a class. So cost an attribute. So I can use a self dot cost equal to some value. Assume it's a parameterized constructor. So CST, can use CST. It's one type of. So this is cost is an instance variable. Remember, this one is instance variable. So object attribute is defined as an instance variable inside a class. Okay. I'm taking the second attribute. Second attribute is brand. Self dot brand. And equal to, I'm using this is a parameterized constructor. So you can write BNT. Okay, and you can brand equal to PRNT. It's a particular variable name actually. That value we are going to pass, that will be initialized inside the instance variables called brand. This is also an instance variable. This is also an instance variable. And now this action, object action, is defined as a method inside a class. So how to define a method? Definition and calling method, right? So you can use method. I'm going to define. Okay, I'm going to define a particular method inside my class. Then I can use this calling attribute, because it is calling attribute. Calling function you can use like this. Okay, now if I'm going to initialize some value here, time being, if you want you can print, or for the timing I'm not just writing one function itself, and this function contains some value like this is mobile calling, something like this, right? Okay, it's a function. It's a function. Okay, and it's a constructor. Fine. So object, attribute, instance variable, object, action, function. Right. Okay. Now this is generally the approach how we can define a particular class. Okay. Now I can define multiple object. Assume I'm defining another one object. Okay, so I told you that object means, I told you that I'm just saying it's slightly more explored because some participants first time is going with this programming approach. So from that point of view, let me spend some time here. I told you that whatever the things I find in real life, I can define it as an object. I have taken the mobile object. That have object should have state and behavior. Okay, now I'm taking another one object. Let me tell you whether it is an object or not. I'm writing here beautiful. I'm writing some word beautiful, some word running, some word like count, then red, then and then I'm just writing order. Okay, I've just given here some of the words. Now you have to identify which is object, which we can define it as an object or not. Fine. So first, beautiful is an object or not? Beautiful is not an object. I told you just now that object I'll define for whom I have attribute and action, but beautiful, it's itself an attribute value. Correct? It's an right? It's attribute value. So it is not a object. We should not define it as an object. Similarly, running is an action. Is an object. Running is an action. It's an action. So object is something that have attribute and action, but running is itself an action. So we should not define it as an object. Now account. Now I told you that just think this account, whether account is object or not. Is this account an object? Account. Like your bank account, savings account, current account. So is it an object? Account. The point is that there is two types of object. One object that I can touch. That is tangible. There's two types of object. One is called tangible. Another is called intangible. Tangible means that I can touch. Intangible, intangible, right? So these account object you cannot touch. Mobile object you can touch. Account is an object. It is also an object. Account, it is an object. It's an object. But this object you cannot touch. Cannot touch a bank account? No. But it has some attribute and action. Attribute like account ID, account number, action like account open, account close, right? So account is an object. Now I have another one word called red. It's an object or not? I have another one called red. So red is a color. It's a color value. It's a color value, right? It's an attribute value. Red is an attribute value. So it is not an object. We should not define it's an object. It's an attribute value, right? Then I have used order. I use order. Which order? Order means I want to say that assume Atos got an order of this much amount from this government. So that order I'm talking about. Order means right. So that order, can I touch that order? No, right? It's intangible. Cannot touch, but it has some attribute and action. Attribute like order ID, order name, action like order open, order closed, order in processing, right? So order is an object, right? So like this way, I can say that the word that I can define attribute and action. So something that have state and behavior I can define as an object, right? Okay. Right? Okay. So here I can find some object inside the room where I'm sitting. Similarly, I can find some object from, I have to find some object from a problem domain. Again, I'm saying, assume I'm sitting in a meeting room or I'm sitting in a classroom. So where I'm sitting, I can find lots of object that is surrounding me. Similarly, I have to find some object from the problem domain. So let me give you one problem domain. Similarly, I have to find some object from the problem domain. How I can get an object from a problem domain, right? So let me give you a problem domain from where I have to get attribute for this customer ID, customer name. Similarly, two attribute for this short ID and short name. Now action you can say display order. One action you can say display order. Fine. This is one option. Here customer, you can add some if I want to use assume three actions, I'm going to write this customer display sort details. So from a problem domain, I can identify an object, and for each object, I can define some attribute and action. For each object, I can define some attribute and action, right? So for this object, I've given only two attributes here. Similarly, I can add multiple attributes. I have added one action, like this, multiple actions you can define based on the project requirement. Now, this is my problem. From the problem domain, I got this three object, right? That means I have to get three class, right? So the point is that from the problem domain, I can identify multiple objects, and those objects I can define as a class, right? Okay. Coming into that, let's come back to our existing application that we are talking about. We have created a mobile object. And here an attribute is defined instance variable inside a class, and action is defined as a method class. This is in general talk, but in Python specific, I'm just saying one by one. In general, we use for whatever object-oriented programming is there for everyone. This is the approach. If you're .NET object-oriented programming, C++, Java, Python, everyone, everywhere the object concept is same, and how we're going to implement based on the language, it depends. Now let's come to this mobile class. We got this mobile class. Fine. Okay. In this class, instance variable came from the attribute. Method came from the object action. Fine. Now what I'm going to do? Now I have to create an object of this class. How? Mobile, like this way. Create an object. Fine. Now that object should point out by a particular reference, right? So R or M equal to this. So that object point out with the reference called M. M is pointing out to this mobile object, as I talked about last time. This is an object. Object is pointing out by this handle. So M, so we say M is an object. M is not an object. M is a reference. That reference is pointing out to this object. So we say that M is an object, but M is not the actual object. Actual object is this one. This is an object. Hit it in the hip. But since this reference is pointing out this object, so we say that a small m is an object. So I have to call this method creating an object of a class. How? I have to use m dot calling. So I have called this method an object of the class. Fine. So it's a very simple part. Now here we have to know some point. Here we have to explore some point. Like we have to explore some point. Just here. Especially who is doing first time for them. Now see here, please. First point is that here I have used two things. One is called method, another is called constructor. In here, say there. Now you will say that then what is the difference between here? This is a constructor, I told you, and this is a method. So first point comes into picture, then how I can distinguish or differentiate between method and constructor. Calling is a method. Constructor is used to initialize my object. Now how I can differentiate between these two? Correct? Now the thing here, I'm talking about from Python specific also, that the method that I am going to create, that is an user-defined name. You can use any name. That method is an action, fine, but the name you can select based on the action that you're going to create. That means that this method name will be user-defined. It's an action, fine, but it's an user-defined. Fine. Whereas this constructor is not user-defined in case of Python. In case of Python, constructor is predefined. It's a predefined. Control C. So you can write here P. In case of Python, it is predefined. I'm talking about from Python specific. In case of Python, it's predefined. You have to use this name. Now, in case of default, now there is two constructor, default constructor, parameterized constructor. So in case of default constructor, there is no argument. In case of default constructor, no argument. So default constructor will come like this. Does this. Control C. It will be like this. That's it. Right. So there is no argument. But in case of parameter constructor, there is an argument. Right. Okay. So in case of constructor, name is predefined. Method name is user defined. First point we got, right? Okay. Right. Now second point I want to say. Now see, this is a method, and how I'm calling this method? How I'm calling this method? I'm calling this method creating an object. Fine. I'm calling this method creating an object of the class. But how we are going to call this constructor? Are you calling it? No. So this constructor is called automatically when you're creating this object. This constructor is called automatically when you are creating this object, right? So there's another one difference you can see here. Second point of difference. Method, right? User have to call, right? So user call creating object of class, right? But in construct, it is not like that. It will be automatically called. When you're creating this object, that time this construct will be called, because I'm using here parameterized constructor, right? So in case of parameterized constructor, you have sent some parameter like cost, assume this, and the brand assume something ABC. It will call this a parameterized constructor. I think this is the correct one. I'm going to add, it will execute also noises, right? Okay, right. So it will be second point. I can say constructor will be called automatically, right? So constructor is called automatically. Fine. Okay. Now in Python, I'm talking about Python specific, very specific to Python, is that I can execute a Python program not like this. If I think I'm not given some examples. I can, if I'm, now this is an example I'm using how I'm going to create a Python program in object-oriented way, right? But a Python program I can create in procedure-oriented programming also. Python I can execute in procedure-oriented programming also. Assume I have one variable int. Sorry, in Python I have variable a equal to 20. A variable b equal to 30. Now I'm going to define def method one. Okay. Self. I'm going to define this method. What I'm going to do inside this method, I'm using sum equal to here I can write self dot no here or if I'm going to write here like a, I'm not 10 b equal to 20. Okay, and sum equal to a plus b, and then I'm printing print sum, right? Okay, method is there. Okay, now I'm going to call this method like method one. Okay, write sum, self.sum. If you write file, save it and execute. Or if I'm not, it should come like this. Let's see, I'm going to print something. Print hello. Okay, I'm not printing any variable here. It's a method. What I want to say is that this is a method. This method I'm going to execute without using any class. So save it. Okay, it should go execute without file save.
You are not creating
Yes.
an object of this.
Yeah. No. Just here. That's why I came into picture. I'm talking about procedure-oriented programming, POP. In case of POP, I don't have to create any class. I have just written one method and calling this method. That's it, and I got the output hello. Not only same operation that I'm going to write a equal to 20. Okay, b equal to 30. The complete thing is inside a method only. Just see here, please, and then I'm going to do the addition. Addition class. Or I can write a plus b. I'm going to use here sum equal to a plus b, and then I'm printing the value of sum. So file, save it, right? And then execute this code. Execute this code. It is printing at 30. So where is my class? There is no class. I've just written the method and executing, no class. So this will do in POP or positive oriented. It is not mandatory that I have to create a class. But if you are using Python with object oriented approach, then you have to create a class. Inside a class, you should have a method. Inside a method, you have to define some code, then you're calling. But in case of procedure-oriented approach, you don't have to create any class because Python support object-oriented approach as well as procedure-oriented approach, both the approach. That's why this code will run without creating class. Fine, that we are talking about here in this example definition. This is an approach that I have used object-oriented approach, right? So what we find is that the method, it is not mandatory that in case of Python program, method will be always inside a class, right? Because see this example. There is no, this method is not inside the class. It is outside a class. There is no class at all because there is no concept of class in case of procedure-oriented programming. So that means in Python, if I'm going to execute a method, that method may be inside a class, maybe outside a class. Again, I'm saying in Python, if I'm going to define a method, that method may be inside a class, maybe outside the class. Both is possible. From Python perspective, if that functionality is inside a class, we say it is a method. If that functionality is outside of class, we say it is a function. We use that. If you go with some technical specification, you may find that term. They are going to divide as method and function. Some naming slight approach is there, but it is up to you. Generally, what we say is that this function is defined inside a class. So, so that functionality, if it is inside a class, we say that, let me tell you here, Control Z. Use a term like function inside the class is called method. It's an approach. If you want, you can use that approach. Else, because if you go with some technical specification as well as if you go with API documentation also, you'll get this term. That's why I just mention here. Function outside the class is called function. Right? So that approach inside a class, we say it is a method. Outside the class, we say it is a function. That approach is there. Okay, fine. Now see this. See this class, that mobile class we have created. Now in this mobile class, find lots of questions about this self. What is this self? What is this self? Right? So let's talk about some points on this self. Let's talk about some points on this self. Now, this self, trying to say some point about this self, that it is used to point current object. In Java, it's the same type of keyword is there that is called this keyword. Okay, so it is used to point current object. Fine. Okay. Now the thing is that can I create a particular constructor without using self? No, I don't want to use this. Can I do it like this? No. We can't. Inside a constructor in Python, we should have minimal one attribute that is called self. You must have to define. Okay. Sure. And so what I can say here, first point is that this self, it is one type of implicit variable, means it's predefined. Now if I say that, can I change this name? I want to make it Delph. I want to make it Relf, RELF. RELF. If I write like this, it will work. I don't want to use self, I use RELF, Relf. Don't use that, use some other variable. I want to use Kelf. Will work. So the thing is that as per if you change this variable name, you can check it is working or not. But as per API specification, we should always use the variable as self. Self will always use. Now let me execute. If I make it Relf, it is working or not. So just see here. It's mobile class, right? Let me execute this. Control C. I'm going to execute it here using a separate file. Close this. Control V. Right click. Okay, show mobile. You can define this. That constructor. This is a right. And this is the another variable you can use. Correct. And this is your method. And this is the object you have created. Correct. And then creating an object, you're calling that specific function. Right. This is the code. Fine. So file, save as, and you can create inside this folder itself and get a particular folder. Like folder name is class Lots of code is it will come one by one, so that's why I've just written this folder like this. Inside this folder, I'm just naming this name as mobile.py. Right, save it. Right, saved. Execute this. We have executed. File save. Calling that. File save. If you want, in this example, I'm not printing anything else. If you want to, this is a parameterized, right? So I have used parameterized only, brand something like that. And after that, I want to print all the attribute value. How I can print all the attribute value? Calling the method, I can print all the attribute value, right? So, or if I do not go, right? So let me check itself. It should assume you don't have any method. Assume this is a constructor you have initialized. I'll save and print that attribute value without method also. You can do it like print and put the attribute value as m dot cost and print m dot brand. It is coming. Okay, so file save and execute. It's coming, right? So this constructor is used to initialize an object, and I'm printing all the attribute value from object to attribute name. I can see those values. Working fine, no issues, right? Okay, so what I'm saying is that just change this name of self to pelf. Self to pelf. I'm just changing this name. Okay, so file, save it. I'm just changing this name, right? Now execute. Is it working? Let's see here. It's working, see? Just see, it is working. Once again, just see here, please. Just see here, please. Execute. Just see it's working. That means the name of the self that I'm going to use here, that is as per API specification, we should use the name self. That is not mandatory that I have to use that spelling only. You can make it pelf, relf, help, right? Without using any keyword. You can use some other words also. It's working, just see. Right? Okay. But as per API specification, try to use always self. And the purpose of this self is that it is used to point current object attribute. But these things is working in Python, but it will not work in Java. In Java, it is fixed. You have to use this keyword. You cannot change that this name with some other. And this keyword is a keyword. Okay, fine. So now, first point I have told you about self. Second point is that this self should be the first argument in your constructor. You cannot make it second or third. Okay, so second point is that it must be the first argument in the constructor. Fine. Okay, third point, if I want to say here, like that I told you instance variable, fine. Inside a constructor, you always define instance variable inside a class. So this keyword, this self is used It is used to declare instance variable. Always we use this self to declare an instance variable like self dot cost. Okay, so you can say that it is used to declare instance variable. Okay, again point if I want to say that just now if you see here, we have in the method I have used self. Just now see here, just see here, here I've just executed one program. This is using object oriented, right? So file save, right? And just now you have executed another one program. That program was this is mobile. Just now I have executed one program called demo, I think. Open this one. Okay, another one program was there. Just now I have executed. Hello, method one. Now see here, is there any concept of class? No. So if there is no concept of class, so I told you that this is self is used to point current object attribute. So if I can, there is no use of using self in case of procedure oriented programming. So that you have to remember. There is no use of using using self in case of procedure oriented programming. It is always used for object oriented programming because it is used to point your object attribute. Right? So we can say that it is used only within the class. It is used inside the class only. Right? Inside the class only it is used. You cannot use this self in procedure-oriented programming because in the procedure-oriented program there is no concept of class. Right? Okay. So so another point I told you that in it's not mandatory that you have to use the same name. You can change that name also. Then also it will work. Right? Okay. So these are some of the attributes we can say about class. Similarly, if you remember constructor, we already told you last day. I'm not saying once again. I'm not writing once again. Just repeating constructor. One point about the constructor is that it is used to initialize your object. Second point is that in case of Python, you're going to use the constructor that's predefined. Third point is that the constructor that you're going to use, it must have an one argument that is self, right? So if you're not using a constructor, here also the concept is there. If you're not using any constructor, then PBM will provide the default constructor, right? If we don't use any constructor inside the class, PVM or Python virtual machine will provide the constructor that we talked about last day, right? 6 point, we talked about the constructor that we can have multiple constructor in the class, but the constructor that you have recently created, that only gets priority. Other constructor is invalid, you can say. Invalid means that when in case of Python programming, always the current constructor you have to use or recent constructor you have to use to create an object. If you have some multiple constructor with multiple argument, no use of those constructor. Why? Because in case of Python, there is no concept of procedure-oriented programming. Sorry, no concept of function overloading. Constructor overloading. So that is here you can see from this example itself.
So the last constructor will only take effect, right?
Always only take effect. Assume you have one constructor. Assume, let me show you here, Control C, you have one constructor here. Already, let's see, you have one constructor like this, right? This is another one constructor, right? Control C. This is one constructor. If you see this code, save it File save. This is one constructor, one argument. This is two argument. It's okay. Fine. Now you're creating an object using mobile like this. What it is saying? It's already giving some code analysis. So based on the property, it is giving this error because you cannot write more than one constructor because no use of writing this if you are using a parameterized constructor. Okay, so that's why it is giving already that error. Just save it and just execute this one. Give me the output, but no use of this constructor. If I want to use this constructor to create an object, assume I want to use this m1 equal to, I want to use this constructor. Okay, so mobile, the constructor argument is 0 0, right? And then I'm going to print m1 dot cost, right? Just execute, file save and execute it. See here, mean the error because it is not supporting this constructor. You have to use this constructor. You have to use, no use of declaring this constructor when you already have this recent constructor. So you have to use this constructor. That's why this code, no use. You are using default constructor, one argument parameterized constructor, but no use. You have to use recent constructor only to create your object in Python. No use of declaring this constructor. Right. So this is some properties that we talked about last day. So you can disable this code, it will work fine. If it is there in the class, it will not create any problem, but right. Okay. So this is another property that we talked about last day about constructor. So this property it already talked about, right? Okay.